All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? Actually, I'm in Seattle today. Took a light flight in. So I thought I would do some quick podcast. Well, I have a little time throughout the day before I got to go to work tonight. But the one thing I want to go through today, I'm going to call is obsessed with focusing in on the wrong. And I think especially now, more than I've ever seen in my life, especially with the political environment, is everybody constantly focusing in on the wrong. And believe me, I'm not going to get into politics, so don't think that that's the route I'm going. I'm just going to talk about things that I think that people are doing that are just absolutely getting ridiculous as far as what I see over the years. And I'm one of them. A lot of times if you listen to my podcast, a lot of things that I bring up or I have a problem with are problems that I have with myself. And more and more, I'm always trying to become more self-aware. But I was one person that was a lot of times looking at everybody else's problems and not acknowledging my own. And I've talked about that in my podcast as well in the past. But back to now, I constantly see on YouTube, social media, the news, everybody always, I shouldn't keep saying constantly, always talking about what's wrong with society, what's wrong with people in general, what's wrong with the way what's going on with the way we talk now, the way we act. People are all finding more and more problems with every aspect of everyone's behavior, which is absolutely, I think, ridiculous. Because it has gotten to the point, I think, where if you don't sometimes bow down or accept what other people are all of a sudden accepting as the norm or wanting you to behave a certain way to make them either feel better or what society or how they're going to judge you. And I get there's different movements that obviously we are evolving. And we need to, grasp that to a certain degree. And I understand that. We are evolving as people. And on the flip side of that, though, because I'm 50 years old now, I am not going to take a lot of bullshit from a lot of people telling me on how I should talk now or act in all different aspects of my life. I think you're out of your fucking mind. And a lot of times, too, I think instead of people always kind of pointing out what's wrong, why don't you point out a solution? Because if you look at life in general, we could sit around and critique everything and turn it into a piece of shit and make it kind of work better for you, But what are you actually getting done? I always said. Kind of reminds me when I was a filmmaker and I was one of these people. Everyone's a critique, but not everyone's creating. And at least as far as I see, a lot of people that are always critiquing things, they don't do shit. All they do is really talk shit all the time. They're not creating anything. They're not really doing anything better for society. Don't get me wrong, they may have a job, but they're always out to point out what everybody else is doing wrong or what is wrong. And these type of people you'll even know when you go eat a meal, for instance. They're always complaining. It's either they're waiting too long, or the food's cold, or it's not as good as it was last time. All these different types of things I'm just using for an example, they always have a problem. Now again, you may be one of these people. And I think to a certain degree, I was one of those people. And sometimes I catch myself still doing that shit a lot of times. But I'm telling you, if you start looking at the good, which takes a long time to reprogram your brain, and you're still going to go in and out, you're going to have, I think, a change in your life, especially when you are someone who is constantly judging others, family members, friends, and colleagues, right? And also leave the bad shit behind. That doesn't mean you have to forget what people have done to you. I understand that. But if you're holding those anchors, man, you are doomed. All you're doing is carrying that baggage and bullshit around with you forever. It's most likely doing nothing for you. But one thing I will say maybe it'll do is that you don't screw yourself again or allow other people to screw you. But still, that's really hard because eventually you are going to trust other people in your life and you can't control what other people are doing. I don't care who you are, unless maybe you're a warden in a prison and you know exactly what how to control people's lives. But if you are in the free world, you have no control whatsoever over what anyone does. I mean, I'd hate to tell you that, but yeah, the reason I bring this up too is I also think that a lot of us not only judge others, we're brutal, always finding fault with everything. We do that to ourselves. And again, I was one of those people. I still am. And there's a difference, I think, too, between wanting to improve yourself, pushing yourself, regardless what direction you want to head into. And I believe that's very healthy. That's a great thing. But then on the flip side, I think sometimes, I'm not saying we expect too much of ourselves, but sometimes we beat ourselves up because we haven't gotten to the point that we thought we would be at. And I definitely feel that a lot of times. Sometimes you may feel like an overachiever, but definitely sometimes an underachiever. And you can't always look at all your failures. Sometimes you really got to go back and look at your successes or success. And I don't think a lot of people do that. I think as we get older, too, a lot of us, it's always, I should have did this. What if I did that? What happened if I married this person instead of this one? Or what, if I wouldn't have got a divorce, or if I should have got a divorce, or I should have changed jobs earlier in my life. I should have had kids. I shouldn't have had kids, maybe, or I should have did this. I should have did that. I live in an environment where a lot of that goes on. I have a massive family. And on both sides of my family, along with a lot of friends. And it's interesting because I'm kind of always listening to them. And it's not easy for anyone. I don't care who you are, and I've talked about this in my past podcast, is that no matter who you are, you're going to run up against a lot of obstacles in your life. And the older you get, most likely, the harder it gets. It doesn't get easier. I think a lot of times people think maybe financially you'll be in a different situation. But from a health standpoint, and also just getting older in general is not easy. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, except the elderly to a certain point. I know I didn't realize it. And I'm not saying I'm extremely old, but I definitely start to see the challenges that I'm going through as I'm getting older compared to things I took advantage of in my youth. And back to, beating yourself up, it doesn't do anything for you. We want to sometimes beat ourselves up to help push ourselves, right? And don't get me wrong, that can work for a lot of people, because I've done that. And I did a podcast once that I used to lift weights and become I want to become extremely strong and get very big, because I had a lot of hatred in my past. Where it came from, I have absolutely no idea. Let me grab a sip of my smoothie here. I think a lot of us carry a lot of baggage that we don't even understand where it came from, because I came from a very loving household. I goof around and say I couldn't have been more loved, and I didn't want to be any more loved. But my parents got a divorce when I was younger, but still I felt very loved by my mother, very still to this day. My father, I know, loved me. He just had his own way of showing it. I had a wonderful stepfather, a stepmother that was very, fine. And I had not only my family members, I had I guess you could say step family members, step grandparents, other aunts and uncles, and they were wonderful to me. I grew up in a very well-known Italian neighborhood. I bounced between Cicero and Melrose Park, Italian feasts, and all this. I don't know where my level of hatred or my type of being mad came from, but I will say it drove me. I don't know if it was part ego. I remember when I played sports, even starting at 5 years old, my intention was not to just go beat them when playing sports, was to destroy them a lot of times. And then I also have a kind side to me where I can't even see anybody get hurt, and it's very, I don't want to call it bipolar, but it's very far, it goes from one extreme to the other. It's either hippie peace, loving, and then it's war with me. I don't have that middle ground a lot of times. I do now. But back then, I remember even If it was parents' night when you're playing sports and the parents would come out to see you compete, whoever I was competing against, I wanted to embarrass them in front of their parents. In wrestling, I wanted to physically destroy them if I did anything. And I carried around this anger. And again, I don't know if it's from my past coming from Naples, Italy, Basto, Italy, or I don't know where it's from. But I had it. And it could trigger once in a while too. I could feel it coming. At least I'm self-aware, where I hold myself back. But even I liked fighting. I didn't even care if I got the shit kicked out of me. And, sometimes we just got to go back to our past and figure out how we ended up here from an emotional standpoint, I think. And I don't think we want to do that a lot of times. Because I talk to my mother a lot of times, and she'd be like, I didn't know this about you, and I didn't know about this about you. And I'm like, well, you didn't need to know about that. You don't live my life. I don't know everything about you either. And a lot of times we do have a perception of people that we think are a certain way because they're around that way around us or society. But then privately or around other people, they're different. And I think that happens with everybody. But back to finding fault in everything, one thing that drove me is I found fault in everyone, and I found fault in myself. And I had to come to grips with that. And it took me many, many years. And I think it really happened when I started to make films because I underestimated how hard it was to make a movie. Entirely, my entire life. I thought it would be so much easier. And what I thought I could create would be so much more amazing than it was. And the reality was I wasn't as good as I thought I was going to be. And I wasn't able to raise the money to even, make the films I wanted to make. But that was still kind of an excuse. So that was another thing. I always had an excuse. And I remember when I finally, with my last 2 books that I made, that was something that I didn't need to get caught up with monster budgets and controlling every aspect of all these different things. Now, I wrote screenplays before, which was fine. But when I wrote my 2 books, I just said, you know what, this is just a book. It's just me sitting down, writing it when I wanted to write it, getting everything out, and it was something I can control entirely. And I was at a point in my life in my 40s where I was just kind of settling in and relaxing and just knowing who I was. And I think sometimes when it comes to people, we don't know really who we are. We think we do, but is what we're doing and what we're saying and the way we're behaving, is that really who we are? And I talk a lot about that with identity. I think sometimes we fall into these identities because because of maybe our past, but it's kind of what we thought people would like about us. And that happens a lot of times with comedians, I think, sometimes a comedian will be a certain way, right? And then he falls into what's working maybe on stage. And then before you know it, he takes on that persona publicly. At least that's where I've seen it. I'm not going to name a lot of comedians that do that, but I've seen that. Now, again, privately, they may be different. And characters, you've probably seen that in certain, I guess, in the world of entertainment where they become something. And is that truly who they are? And I'm not against that. You could do whatever you want to do, but I think that happens with us in society. If, you're starting to get attention for being a tough guy, eventually you're always kind of a tough guy. If you're kind of funny once in a while and you're getting attention, before you know it, you're always trying to be funny. Or you've seen these people, right? You're kind of cool. You dress a certain way, and before you know it, you see the guy going a little more extreme, and then he's a fashionista. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there is. But as time goes on, a lot of times, I think the persona sometimes we took isn't, again, the one we're happy with. But then we're afraid to change because then we're afraid people are going to judge us. So we're back again, kind of in a position that I think is, I can't say, I kind of backed myself into a corner here, and I don't want to screw it up. Basically, what I'm trying to say is when we're not happy with ourselves a lot of times, we're always going to lash out at all the other problems out there. When, again, the problem is with us most of the time. And we don't want to admit that. And especially if you work somewhere. And, no matter where, I haven't had a ton of jobs throughout my life. Honestly, I worked with... when I was younger, I worked for a Melrose Park, which is like a community with, what did I work with? It was with the city. and it was all Italians. It was wonderful. And then I ended up valet parking cars. Then I worked with my father, basically for the most part, for 20 years. Now I travel a lot. I work with another company. It treats me wonderful, Mike. And I didn't have a lot of jobs, but the jobs that I had or have had in the past, I've been surrounded by a lot of people, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. They were kind of more intense. So when I was doing even the city job, there was a lot of people I worked with, all different types of personalities. Then when I valet parked, you're dealing with, very young, all different types of people coming in and out, and they were mainly for banquet halls and wedding halls, I guess you could say. And then working with my father throughout all, of Florida, and then me traveling, I got to see a lot of how people behave, not just in my own circle or my own town or my own city. I've been to so many cities, and I think when it really all comes down to it, we're all different, obviously, in the United States and North America in general, Canada, everywhere, where you kind of go, they talk a certain way, they act a certain way, they all eat a certain food. But I do think, for the most part, I may be wrong, that people a lot of times want the best for one another, but they don't show it. It's almost, and I do that too sometimes, I think, and almost like it's like you're letting your guard down. But I was always complimentary to somebody. If I thought they looked good that day, I'd be like, man, you look great, or your hair looks good. I wasn't insecure enough for, like, guys. I would even say it to men. And I remember other guys going, what are you, fruity, or what do you get? I'm like, no, I dig your shoes, or you look great today, you smell good. I didn't give a shit. Same with women. I would say, hey, that purse looks great, or this, that. At work, thank you so much. Even people I didn't know, I'd be like, man, I heard what you did. That's a great job. And then on the flip side of things, again, if I didn't like the way you were doing certain things, the no filter came in, and I would address them, especially if I was working with them. I didn't have the self-respect a lot of times that I should have. It was, again, extreme one way or another, which wasn't fair to them a lot of times because I didn't always know the facts. But still, that was kind of like a bull in a china shop. I definitely wanted to be sometimes, like they call it the gorilla in the room. My father used to call me the ape, where like I loved being very friendly and open and like, having dinner and drinks and lunch, people having fun around me. But then if it wasn't time to have fun, I definitely was not the person to be around. And I know this too because my cousins, some of them are very much like this. And I see them and I almost get nervous because I know how I get when I get upset. And I know they're going to get like that. And I know how people behave when I get upset. They want to get away, and same that I do to them when they start getting upset. But I think back to everybody, I think for the most part, we have to understand, I think we all want the best for one another. But we, for some reason, I think in the environment we're in now, regardless of what political side you're on, what religious you are, or whatever, we're lashing out more instead of addressing each other, right? Instead of coming at something in a more friendly manner, we're kind of coming in it in an attack mode, lashing out, especially on social media. I've recently had some issues with my mechanic, and I love my mechanic, and he just hasn't been able to fix my car. And I immediately see me starting to get nuts and wanting to go to war with him over this. And he deserves more than that. He's been working on my car many, many years. And I think he's trying his best. And I said, instead of me getting upset on a text even, or when I talk to him on the phone, or even when I see him, I'm going to take a different disposition on this. I don't think he's taking advantage of me whatsoever. I paid for what I had to pay for, and I definitely think he's trying his best fixing my car because we're having a problem that we just can't seem to solve. But me going to war with him is doing nothing for either one of us. And I think a lot of times when somebody does something to us, we automatically think they're screwing us or they're hurting us, when that's not the case. Because on the flip side, I remember when I sold vending equipment to people in the public, and we would sell something and it would get defective after a certain amount of time or it wouldn't work. And they would be so upset with us, and we had nothing to do with it. We're actually trying to help them. And the more we try to help, the madder they're getting because it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go. And I get it, but the truth was, it was no one's fault. It's just something that happens in life. But anyways, I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon. But if you really kind of become, and I've been doing a lot of self-aware stuff, if you find yourself always kind of miserable or attacking people online, especially your friends, and I just heard a good friend of mine just a friend of mine from many, many years ago, again with one of my closest friends, got in kind of a battle on Facebook of all places, regarding religion and all these different types of things. And then I had to go to my buddy, my real close buddy, and say, is this worth it? Right? He's a friend. I'm not saying he's our best friend, but is it really worth it? A lot of shit we do to each other, excuse me, sorry, my throat closed up there. A lot of shit that we're doing to one another, what is the true benefit? Are we out to hurt each other's feelings or degrade each other, make people feel like a piece of shit, make them think that whoever they're, whatever they're interested in should be devalued? I think that's ridiculous. You know, the one thing I would say that I loved about social media is it brought everybody together. But the one thing I don't like about it is it kind of constantly sees what everybody's doing, and you're constantly judging them then. When before in the past, you never knew what they were doing. And you'd go, say you go to a nightclub or a restaurant, or you'd run into your friends, or you'd see different people. You loved them for who they were. Like, for the genuineness of just them being them. You weren't, you didn't have to know about all their other, it could be issues or all the different things they did in their life. It could be religion, it could be politics, it could be all this thing. We didn't have to know their opinion on every aspect of their life. So that's the one thing that I find that's very, and for me, I let everything kind of go. Like, I realize a lot of times and I'm going to wrap it up here, with social media, you have to realize a lot of times people are posting, they're posting to themselves. It's kind of like you're talking to yourself when you post something. At least I believe it. A lot of times you may put something up, and of course you want people to read it or see it or hear it, like my podcast. I don't know who's going to listen to it. Maybe nobody. So I'm kind of voicing my opinion to myself, and when I'm speaking, I'm learning sometimes, like, yeah, that's, don't forget that next time. You should really, do that. And all these different types of things. And I think, of course we're putting things on social media or when we're talking, everything, our beliefs. That doesn't mean 99.9% of the time, you're not going to always be changing people's opinions. And you're not going to all of a sudden, just whatever it is. So you have to understand that. So that's just something you need to, I think, understand is when we first started posting a lot of things on social media, if you remember, I think it was really family driven, fun, exciting, showing people even foods we ate, places we were going. It was a fun environment, where now it has become something where we're mocking people constantly, trashing them. And some of it's funny, I'm not going to lie. I laugh at a lot of shit, videos, memes, all these things. We're making fun of people. And sometimes there's a price to pay for that, I think, to a certain degree, if you're on the other end of that. Because if you are the person being made fun of, it hurts. I'm sure a lot of times we don't want to admit that. So anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you had a chance, check out my YouTube channel. I've been posting a lot of different things I've been going to. I was just in Houston, New York, Boston, Edmonton. I was there on the coldest day, two of the coldest days of the year, and the two coldest, or I should say 2 days, it was the coldest place on the planet. But I've been putting up my favorite coffee houses, smoothie places lately, a lot of fitness things. So if you get a chance, definitely check it out. It's Rich CELENZA, and I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So if you could touch base with me, leave a comment or whatever the case may be. And I wish you nothing but the best, but please be self-aware. You know what I mean? Just kind of look at yourself and it's the oldest cliche, but kind of treat people the way you want to be treated. That's just my theory on it. All right, take care. And again, if you're traveling, safe travels.